Nothing actually seemed wrong that night, and that's exactly why no one saw it coming. The parents said it would be easy. Just follow his routine. And don't worry about the dog. He's harmless. At first, everything felt normal. The child was calm. The house was quiet, until she noticed something strange. The dog wasn't watching the child. It was watching her. Every time she moved, it followed with its eyes. Not curious, not playful, like it was trying to figure something out. Then the boy said something she couldn't ignore. He does that when he forgets. She smiled. Forgets what? The boy looked at her, completely serious.
Who people are.
She didn't understand what he meant. Not until later. Not until the moment everything changed. Before that night became the moment everyone remembered. There were smaller moments. Moments that seemed strange but harmless. A warning hidden inside ordinary behavior. Max had been part of the Wilson family for almost 12 years. To everyone who knew him, he was more than a dog. He was the dog who slept beside Noah's bedroom door when he was sick. The dog who waited by the window every afternoon for the school bus. The dog who had grown up with a little boy who once learned to walk by holding onto his fur. Nobody paid attention when things started changing. At first, it was small. Max would stand in the hallway and stare at empty rooms. He would sometimes hesitate before walking toward familiar people. Some mornings, he would look at Noah like he was trying to place where he had seen him before. The family laughed it off. They called it old age. They called it a strange habit. They said, Max has always been different. But the truth was much harder to accept. Because Max wasn't becoming aggressive. He was becoming confused. And confusion can be dangerous when no one understands what is happening. Before we begin, subscribe if you enjoy psychological mysteries and stories that stay in your mind long after they end. It's free, and every subscription helps this channel continue. Because this story begins with something that seemed completely normal, until the babysitter realized she had noticed the warning signs far too late. The babysitter, Emily Carter, was the first person outside the family to notice something was wrong. She didn't know Max's history. She didn't know the things the family had quietly ignored. She only saw what was happening right in front of her. A dog looking at familiar faces like they belonged to strangers. A child who seemed to understand more than the adults. And a family hiding a secret they didn't even realize was important. There had been another night. Another moment when he stopped recognizing someone he loved. And the Wilson family made a decision that would follow them forever. Six months before the night, everything changed. The Wilson family looked like the kind of family people admired from the outside. They lived in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio, on a street lined with tall trees, carefully maintained lawns, and homes where neighbors knew each other by name. The Wilson house was not perfect, but it was full of memories. Photographs covered the hallway walls. Family vacations, birthday celebrations, first days of school, and in almost every picture, there was one familiar face. Max, a golden retriever with a white patch of fur around his nose and gentle brown eyes that had watched over the family for more than a decade. To Noah Wilson, Max was never just a pet. He was his first friend. Noah was 8 years old, a quiet and thoughtful child who noticed things most adults missed. He had dark brown hair that always looked slightly messy, a curious expression, and a habit of asking questions that surprised people. While other children wanted expensive toys and video games, Noah spent hours sitting beside Max in the backyard, talking to him about school, his fears, and things he didn't know how to say to anyone else. When Noah was younger, Max followed him everywhere. If Noah played outside, Max was beside him. If Noah cried, Max was the first one there. If Noah fell asleep on the couch, Max would lie nearby until someone carried him to bed. The family often joked that Max was Noah's personal bodyguard, and in many ways, he was. Noah's mother, Sarah Wilson, loved Max deeply. She was 40 years old, a hospital nurse who spent most of her life caring for other people. Sarah had a calm personality, warm smile, and the kind of patience that made people trust her. She was the person who remembered everyone's birthdays, checked on elderly neighbors, and always believed there was a solution to every problem. Her husband, Michael Wilson, was 43 and worked as a construction project manager. Michael was practical, hardworking, and protective. He was the type of person who fixed things instead of talking about them. A broken door, a leaking pipe, a damaged fence. If something was wrong, Michael believed you found the problem and repaired it. That was how he looked at Max too. When Max began changing, Michael searched for simple explanations. He's just getting older. That was what he told himself. Because the alternative was something he didn't want to face. Max was 12 years old. For a golden retriever, that was already considered an advanced age. His body had started slowing down. He walked more carefully. He slept longer. The energy that once filled the house had faded. But Sarah and Michael still saw the same Max they had always known. The dog who protected their son. The dog who had been there through every important moment. The problem was, Max remembered the past better than he understood the present. The first strange incident happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Sarah was making coffee when Max suddenly started growling near the hallway. She looked over and saw him staring toward a framed family photograph. Max. The dog didn't move. His body was tense. His eyes were fixed on the picture. Sarah walked closer and laughed softly. Are you scared of a photo now? But Max continued staring, almost like he didn't recognize what he was seeing. Then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. Max looked away. He walked over to Sarah and rested his head against her hand like nothing had happened. Sarah mentioned it to Michael that night. He smiled. Maybe he just got confused. And that answer felt comfortable, because sometimes people accept the explanation they want to believe. A few weeks later, another moment happened. Noah came home from school wearing a new jacket. When he opened the front door, Max ran toward him. But halfway across the room, the dog stopped. He stared at Noah. Not excited. Not happy. Confused. For several seconds, Noah stood frozen. Then he slowly removed his backpack. Max. The dog moved closer. He sniffed Noah's hand. And suddenly his tail started wagging. The moment disappeared. Everyone laughed. But Noah didn't. Because children notice when something changes. That night, he asked his mother a question. Mom, does Max know who I am? Sarah smiled sadly. Of course he does. But she didn't sound completely certain. And Noah heard that. As the months passed, the strange moments became harder to ignore. Max sometimes barked at his own reflection. He became startled by shadows moving across the walls. He occasionally woke up confused, pacing through the house as if he didn't know where he was. The family noticed, but they explained it away. They didn't want to believe the dog who had protected them for years was losing pieces of himself. Then came the moment that changed everything. A few days before Emily arrived to babysit, Sarah found Max standing outside Noah's bedroom door. The dog was staring inside. Noah was sitting on his bed. Max, he called. The dog didn't react. For a moment, Noah looked like a stranger to him. Then Max walked away. Sarah watched from the hallway, and for the first time, she felt afraid. Not of Max, but of what was happening to him. Because deep down, she knew something was wrong. And what she didn't know was that the signs had already been there. They just had not understood them yet. And by the time they finally did, it would be too late. The first thing Emily Carter noticed about Max was not that he looked dangerous. It was that he looked lost. That was the word she would use later when people asked her what she remembered about that night. Not angry. Not aggressive. Lost. Because before everything happened, before the hospital lights and emergency calls and questions no one could answer, there was a moment when Emily stood inside the Wilson family's living room and looked at an old golden retriever who seemed like he was searching for something he couldn't find. Emily was 26 years old. She had been babysitting for almost 4 years while finishing her degree in early childhood education. She was the kind of person parents trusted quickly, patient, responsible, quietly observant. She wore her brown hair tied back most of the time, dressed simply in jeans, comfortable sweaters, and sneakers because she believed working with children required being ready for anything. But nothing about her previous babysitting jobs prepared her for Max. When Sarah and Michael Wilson left that evening, they gave Emily the usual instructions. No complicated rules. No unusual warnings. Just the normal details. Noah eats dinner around 7. His bedtime is 9. He likes to read before sleeping. Then Sarah pointed toward Max lying near the fireplace. And that's Max. Emily smiled. He's beautiful. Sarah laughed. He's old, but he still thinks he runs the house. Michael nodded. He's been with Noah since he was a baby. There was pride in his voice, almost like he was introducing a member of the family. Emily understood. She had grown up with dogs too. She knew how attached families became. Before leaving, Sarah bent down and rubbed Max's head. Be good, old man. Max lifted his eyes toward her. For a second, everything seemed normal. The front door closed. The car disappeared down the street. And Emily was alone with Noah and Max. For the first hour, nothing unusual happened. Noah ate dinner. They watched a movie. They talked about school. Max rested on the floor. It looked exactly like the peaceful evening Sarah and Michael had promised. Until Emily noticed something. She was sitting on the couch when she reached for her drink, and Max's eyes followed her hand. She ignored it. A few minutes later, she stood up to take the empty plates into the kitchen. Again, Max watched, not moving his body, only his eyes. Emily looked back. Okay, she smiled. You're making me feel like I'm being judged. Noah looked up from the television. He does that sometimes. Emily laughed. Does he? Noah nodded. Then he went quiet. The way children do when they know something but aren't sure if adults will believe them. Emily noticed. What? Noah looked toward Max. He's trying to remember. The smile slowly disappeared from Emily's face. Remember what? Noah shrugged. I don't know. Then he added. Sometimes he forgets things. Emily looked at the dog. What kind of things? Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached down and touched Max's back. The dog turned toward him. For a second, his eyes softened, like he recognized him. Then Noah whispered, People. Emily thought he was making a joke, but Noah wasn't smiling. That bothered her. Later that evening, Emily saw another strange moment. Max walked toward the hallway mirror. He stopped. His entire body became still. Then he stared at his own reflection. A low sound came from his throat. Not a bark. Not exactly a growl. A warning. Emily stood up. Noah. The boy looked over. Oh. He sounded almost disappointed. He does that too. Emily frowned. Does what? He thinks there's another dog. She looked at the mirror. Then back at Max. Has he always done that? Noah shook his head. No. That one word stayed in her mind. No. Because if Max had always been strange, that would have been easy to accept. But he hadn't always been this way. Something had changed. Around midnight, after Noah was asleep, Emily sat quietly in the living room. The house was dark except for a small lamp beside her. Max was lying near the hallway, but he wasn't sleeping. He was staring toward Noah's bedroom door. Emily watched him. There was something heartbreaking about it. The dog looked worried, confused, almost afraid. Then suddenly, Max stood up. He walked toward the bedroom. Emily followed carefully. Max. The dog stopped, slowly turned, and looked directly at her. For a few seconds, he didn't move. Emily felt a strange feeling in her chest, because she had the sudden impression that Max wasn't deciding whether she was a threat. He was deciding whether he knew her. Then his expression changed. The tension disappeared. He walked away. Emily stood there, confused. She didn't know it yet, but that moment would become one of the most important memories of that night, because Max had already shown her the truth. He was forgetting, and everyone around him had been pretending not to notice. By the time the storm arrived, Emily Carter had almost convinced herself that she was overthinking everything. That was what people did when something didn't make sense. They searched for a reasonable explanation. They told themselves there had to be one. Max was old. Old dogs acted differently. Old dogs got confused. That was all. At least, that was what Emily wanted to believe, because the alternative was much harder to accept. A few minutes before midnight, rain began hitting the windows of the Wilson family home. Not a gentle rain. A heavy storm that made the entire house feel smaller. The trees outside moved violently in the wind. Branches scratched against the glass. Thunder rolled across the sky. Noah was already in bed, but he wasn't asleep. Emily noticed his bedroom light was still on. She knocked softly. Still awake. A small voice answered. Yeah. Emily opened the door. Noah was sitting under his blanket with a book in his hands. Max was lying beside the bed, just like he had done for years. Emily smiled. Your guard dog is still working? Noah looked at Max. Then his expression changed. He's not always my guard dog anymore. Emily stepped closer. What do you mean? Noah looked uncomfortable, like he knew something was wrong but didn't know how to explain it. Sometimes he gets scared. Of what? Noah looked toward the hallway. Things he knows. Before Emily could ask another question, a loud crack of thunder shook the house. Max suddenly lifted his head. His ears moved. His body became tense. Emily noticed immediately. Max. The dog looked toward the hallway. The same hallway where the mirror was hanging. The same place where he had become confused earlier. Noah reached down. It's okay, Max. But Max didn't respond. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then the lights went out. The entire house fell into darkness. Noah gasped. Emily quickly turned on her phone flashlight. It's okay. Probably just the storm. She tried to sound calm, but something felt different. The darkness changed the house. The familiar rooms became unfamiliar shapes. The The sounds became louder. The wind, the rain, the movement of shadows across the walls. And Max noticed it too. Emily could hear him breathing. Slow, heavy, uneasy. She moved the flashlight toward him. "Hey, buddy." But Max stepped backward. Emily froze. Because the dog wasn't acting like he recognized her. His eyes moved across her face. Searching, trying to understand. "Noah." The boy sat up. His voice was quiet. "He doesn't know where he is." Emily looked at him. "What?" Noah swallowed. "Sometimes when it's dark, he forgets more." That sentence made Emily's stomach tighten. Before she could respond, Max suddenly turned toward Noah. The room became completely silent. The boy slowly lowered his feet to the floor. "Max." The dog didn't move. Emily watched as Noah carefully reached out his hand. "Max, it's me." But the dog stepped forward. Not toward Noah like a friend. Toward him like a stranger. Emily immediately moved between them. "Max, stop." The dog looked at her. Again, that same confused expression. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Then something happened that Emily would never forget. Max looked at Noah, then looked back at Emily, as if he couldn't understand why two unfamiliar people were standing in his home. The storm continued outside. The power remained off. And inside that dark bedroom, Emily finally understood. The strange behavior wasn't random. The staring, the confusion, the moments when Max seemed lost. They were all connected. The dog wasn't becoming mean. He was losing pieces of reality. "Call my parents," Noah whispered. Emily reached for her phone. But before she could unlock the screen, Max moved. Everything happened quickly. Too quickly. There was no warning bark. No aggressive growl. No moment that gave Emily time to prepare. Just confusion. Fear. An instinct. The sound that followed was one Emily would remember for the rest of her life. She dropped her phone. She shouted for Max to stop. She grabbed Noah and pulled him away. The house that had felt safe only minutes earlier became a place of panic. A place where nobody understood what was happening. When the neighbors finally heard the screams and the emergency lights arrived, the storm was still raging. Noah was rushed to the hospital. Emily sat outside the emergency room, shaking. Her clothes were torn. Her hands were trembling. And one thought kept repeating in her mind. The signs were there. They had all been there. But nobody listened. Hours later, Sarah and Michael arrived. The moment they saw Emily's face, they knew something terrible had happened. Sarah looked toward the hospital doors. "Where's Noah?" Emily could barely speak. "He's inside." Michael looked confused. "What happened?" Emily looked at them. And for the first time, she asked the question nobody had asked before. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah froze. "Tell you what." Emily's voice broke. "That this happened before." The hallway became silent. Because the expression on their faces changed. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. And that was when Emily realized something. The Wilson family wasn't hearing about this for the first time. They were hearing it become impossible to ignore. The hospital hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only exists after something terrible has happened. Emily Carter sat in a plastic chair outside Noah Wilson's room, staring at the floor. Hours had passed, but her mind was still trapped in that dark bedroom. The storm. The power outage. The look in Max's eyes. Not anger. Not hatred. Confusion. That was the part she couldn't escape. Because deep down, Emily knew something. Max had not attacked because he wanted to hurt Noah. Something inside him had changed. Something had gone wrong. But what bothered her most was not what happened. It was what happened before. The signs. The strange behavior. The things Noah had tried to explain. And the way Sarah and Michael reacted when she asked the question. "Why didn't you tell me this happened before?" They didn't answer. They didn't have to. Their faces told her everything. They knew. A few minutes later, Sarah walked toward Emily. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying. "He's stable," she said quietly. Emily finally looked up. "Is he going to be okay?" Sarah nodded slowly. "The doctors think so." For a moment, both women said nothing. Then Emily asked the question she had been holding back. "What happened before?" Sarah looked away. That small movement was enough. Emily knew she was right. "Sarah." The mother sat beside her. And for the first time that night, the woman who always seemed confident looked completely broken. "There were signs," Sarah whispered. Emily waited. We just didn't understand them. The words stayed between them. Because that was the hardest truth. Not that nobody saw the warning signs, but that people saw them and convinced themselves they weren't important. Sarah took a deep breath. It started almost a year ago. She explained that Max's changes had happened slowly. So slowly that each moment seemed easy to ignore. The first time was when Max stopped responding to his own name. Michael had called him from the backyard. Normally, Max would run immediately. But that day he just stood there, looking around, like he had forgotten where the voice was coming from. Michael laughed. He thought Max was distracted. Then there was the time Max growled at Sarah. Not aggressively. Not like he wanted to attack. It was more like fear. Sarah had walked into the bedroom wearing a coat and a hat after coming home from work. Max stared at her, then backed away. For several seconds, he acted like she was a stranger. Until she spoke. Until he heard her voice. Then everything changed. He ran toward her, whining, almost apologizing. Sarah wiped away a tear. I should have known. Emily looked at her. Known what? That he wasn't being strange. Sarah's voice became softer. He was scared. The words affected Emily. Because that changed everything. Max wasn't a dangerous dog. He was an animal losing his understanding of the world around him. But nobody knew how serious it could become. Or maybe they didn't want to know. 2 months before the attack, Michael took Max to the veterinarian after another incident. That was the part he had never told Emily. The part he didn't want anyone else to know. The vet had asked questions. Had Max become confused? Did he seem lost? Did he have changes in sleeping patterns? Was he reacting differently to familiar people? Michael remembered answering yes. To almost everything. But when the veterinarian suggested further testing, Michael hesitated. Is it necessary? The vet looked at him carefully. It depends on what you want to understand. Michael remembered those words. Because they sounded simple at the time. But later, they felt like a warning. The veterinarian explained that older dogs could experience a condition called canine cognitive dysfunction. A condition similar in some ways to dementia in humans. It could affect memory, awareness, recognition, behavior. The dog might not understand familiar surroundings, might not recognize familiar faces, might react out of fear because the world around them suddenly felt unfamiliar. Michael had listened, but he also looked at Max lying beside him. The same dog who had protected Noah since infancy. The same dog who had slept beside his child's bed. And he convinced himself it couldn't be that serious. He's still Max, Michael told himself. And that became the mistake. Because loving someone, or something, can sometimes make people blind to what is happening. The next morning, a veterinarian named Dr. Karen Miller arrived at the hospital. She had treated Max before. And when she heard what happened, her expression changed. Not shock. Not surprise. Concern. I need to ask something, she said. Sarah and Michael looked at her. Was Max showing signs before tonight? Neither parent answered. Dr. Miller already knew. She had seen this reaction before. The silence. The guilt. The denial. Finally, Michael spoke. Yes. His voice was barely audible. Yes, he was. Emily looked at him. Then why did nobody tell me? Michael looked down. Because there was no good answer. The truth was uncomfortable. They had not hidden Max's behavior because they wanted to put Emily in danger. They hid it because admitting the truth meant admitting they had a problem they couldn't fix. Dr. Miller opened Max's medical records. Then she found something. A note from a previous visit. Something Michael and Sarah had forgotten. A record of an earlier incident. A warning. A moment when Max had already stopped recognizing someone familiar. Dr. Miller looked up. This wasn't the first episode. The room became silent. Emily felt a chill. Who was the first person he forgot? Nobody answered immediately. Then Sarah whispered. It was me. And that was when Emily realized the attack on Noah was not the beginning of Max's decline. It was the moment everyone finally had to admit it existed. For years, the Wilson family believed Max's greatest gift was his loyalty. He never left Noah's side. He knew the sound of Michael's truck pulling into the driveway. He knew Sarah's footsteps before she even opened the front door. He knew the small routines that made their house feel like home. But what nobody understood was that those memories were slowly becoming harder for him to reach. They were still there, somewhere, but they were buried beneath confusion. And every once in a while, Max would get lost trying to find them. After the hospital incident, Dr. Karen Miller sat down with the Wilson family and explained something they had avoided hearing. Max didn't wake up one day and become a different dog, she said. He changed little by little. Sarah listened quietly. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. She looked like someone trying to go back through every moment and find the exact second when everything started falling apart. When did you first notice? Dr. Miller asked. Sarah looked at Michael. Neither of them wanted to answer. Because the truth was painful. They had noticed. They just didn't want to believe it. Finally, Sarah spoke. It was after Noah's birthday. Emily looked at her. What happened? Sarah took a deep breath. Noah had a party in the backyard. All his friends were there. Max loved those days. He would run around with the kids and sit in the middle of everything. She paused. But that day, something was different. Max had spent most of the afternoon lying under the table. At first, everyone thought he was tired. But when Noah ran over and hugged him, Max pulled away. Not aggressively. Not violently. Just confused. The dog stared at Noah's face. The same face he had looked at every single day for 8 years. And for a few seconds, he didn't know him. Sarah remembered the moment because Noah noticed. Children always notice. Mom, he had asked quietly, why is Max looking at me like that? Sarah had forced a smile. He's just tired. But Noah didn't believe her. Because Max had never looked at him like a stranger before. That night, after everyone left, Noah sat beside Max on the floor. You forgot me today, didn't you? Sarah heard him say it, and it broke something inside her. Because her 8-year-old son understood what the adults were refusing to accept. Something was changing. After the attack, Emily found herself thinking about Noah more than anything else. Not the dog, not the parents, the child. Because Noah had known. He had tried to explain. The strange words, the quiet warnings. He forgets people. Emily realized those weren't random words from a child. They were a child's way of describing something he had been watching happen for months. A few days after the incident, Emily visited the Wilson family. Noah was recovering. He was physically healing, but emotionally, things were harder. When Emily entered his room, Noah was sitting near the window. A small bandage covered part of his arm. His favorite stuffed animal was beside him. Emily sat down. How are you feeling? Noah shrugged. Okay. Emily knew that answer. Adults said it all the time. Children used it when they didn't know how to explain their feelings. She looked toward him. Noah. He looked up. Were you scared of Max? The boy was quiet for a long time. Then he shook his head. No. Emily was surprised. Why not? Noah looked down. Because Max was scared too. That answer stayed with her. Because it was the same thing she had felt. Max wasn't attacking because he hated them. He was reacting to a world he no longer understood. Meanwhile, Dr. Miller continued examining Max. The dog was not kept as a punishment. The family knew that would be wrong. He was monitored carefully while doctors tried to understand the condition. The results confirmed what they feared. Max was experiencing advanced canine cognitive dysfunction. His brain was struggling with memory and recognition. The familiar world around him was becoming unfamiliar. Dr. Miller explained that dogs with this condition could experience confusion, anxiety, disrupted sleep, changes in behavior, difficulty recognizing familiar people. But she also explained something important. Max wasn't choosing to forget. He wasn't deciding who mattered. His brain was failing to connect the memories the way it used to. Those words were painful for the family, because it meant the dog they loved was still there. But he was trapped behind something they couldn't see. A week later, Michael went through old files looking for Max's medical history. He found something that made him stop. A note from almost a year earlier, written by the veterinarian. Possible cognitive decline. Further evaluation recommended. Michael stared at the words. Because he remembered that day. He remembered reading the note. And he remembered putting the paper away. He told himself they would handle it later. When things were less busy. When Noah's school schedule calmed down. When life was easier. But later never came. And that was the part he couldn't forgive himself for. Not because he didn't love Max. But because he did. Too much. Sometimes love makes people protect the image of someone they care about instead of facing the reality in front of them. And Michael had protected the memory of the old Max. The playful Max. The loyal Max. The dog who saved them. But he failed to see the Max who needed help. Months later, Emily would think about the night of the attack. She would remember the darkness. The silence. The fear. But she would also remember something else. The moment before everything happened. The moment Max looked at Noah. Confused. Lost. Searching. Because that expression told the real story. The dog wasn't remembering an enemy. He was trying to find his family. And he couldn't. But there was still one question nobody had answered. If Max had been showing signs for months, why did the attack happen that night? And why had the power outage changed everything? For weeks after the incident, the Wilson family struggled with a question that had no simple answer. How could a dog who had spent years protecting their child become the reason he ended up in the hospital? People wanted a clear explanation. They wanted someone to blame. Some blamed the parents for ignoring the warning signs. Some blamed themselves for trusting an aging dog. Others blamed Max. But the truth was more complicated than that. Because Max was not a dangerous animal who suddenly became cruel. He was a sick animal who became trapped inside a world he no longer understood. And that was the hardest thing for the Wilson family to accept. The dog they loved was still there, but pieces of him were disappearing. 3 months after the attack, Emily returned to the Wilson house one final time. Not as a babysitter, not because she had to, but because she wanted to say goodbye. The house looked different. Not physically. The walls were the same. The furniture was in the same place. The family pictures still hung in the hallway. But something had changed. The house no longer felt like it was hiding a secret. The truth was finally out. Sarah opened the door. She looked older than Emily remembered. Not because of age. Because guilt changes people. "I'm glad you came," Sarah said. Emily nodded. "How is Noah?" Sarah smiled softly. "He's getting better." They walked into the living room. Max was resting near the window. Older. Slower. But peaceful. Emily stopped when she saw him. For a moment, she remembered that terrifying night. The darkness. The panic. The fear. Then she looked closer. And she saw something else. Max lifted his head. He looked at her. And for a few seconds, his eyes were uncertain. Emily held her breath. She wondered if he remembered. Then Noah walked into the room. Max. The dog turned. The little boy slowly approached. He sat beside him and placed his hand on his fur. "It's okay." Max relaxed. His tail moved slightly. Emily watched quietly. Because Noah understood something many adults struggled with. Max had forgotten moments. But he had not forgotten love. The family eventually made difficult decisions. They changed Max's environment. They created a calmer routine. They removed things that caused confusion. They followed every recommendation from Dr. Miller. They learned that caring for an aging animal was not only about remembering the good years. It was about protecting them during the difficult ones too. Sarah admitted something months later. "I kept waiting for Max to become the old Max again. But I realized I was spending so much time missing who he was that I wasn't helping who he had become." Those words changed how the family saw everything. Because sometimes people don't lose someone all at once. Sometimes they lose pieces slowly. A memory. A familiar reaction. A part of the person or animal they knew. And the hardest part is learning how to love what remains. Emily never forgot that night. Years later, when people asked her about the experience, they expected her to talk about the attack. But she rarely did. Instead, she talked about the warning signs. The things people ignore because they are easier to ignore. The strange behavior. The small changes. The moments when someone says, "Something feels different." And everyone answers, "It's probably nothing." Because sometimes nothing is where the biggest problems begin. Max passed away peacefully later that year. The Wilson family buried him beneath the tree in their backyard. The same place where Noah used to play with him when he was younger. On the day they said goodbye, Noah placed an old photograph beside him. It was a picture from years earlier. A little boy sitting beside a young golden retriever. Both smiling. Both looking completely certain that they would always have each other. Noah looked at the picture for a long time. Then he whispered, "You didn't forget me." Sarah heard him. She asked, "How do you know?" Noah looked toward the backyard. And he answered, "Because even when he couldn't remember my face." He paused. He still knew I was someone he loved. The story of Max was never really about a dog that attacked. It was about a family that learned too late that love alone does not always protect the ones we care about. Sometimes love means paying attention. Sometimes love means accepting painful truths. And sometimes love means understanding that someone can change without choosing to. Because the most heartbreaking part of losing a memory is not forgetting the people you love. It is watching the people you love realize you are forgetting them. And on that night, when the lights went out and everything changed, the Wilson family finally understood something they should have known earlier. Max never stopped loving them. He was just slowly losing the ability to find his way back to them. If Max's story made you see things differently, take a moment to think about this. Have you ever noticed a small change in someone you loved, but ignored it because you thought it was nothing? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd genuinely like to hear your story. And if this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more psychological mystery and emotional stories. Because sometimes, the signs we overlook are the ones we wish we had noticed sooner. Until the next story, stay curious.